Everyone on Flight 299 thought the woman in seat 1A was just another passenger refusing to follow the rules. The flight attendant, Brianna, was screaming, shaking, and threatening to have her arrested the second they touched down. She thought she was humiliating a nobody. She thought she had all the power. But she didn't know that the quiet woman sipping sparkling water wasn't just a passenger. She was the one funding the airline's survival. And while Brianna was busy calling the police, that woman was busy sending a single text message that would bankrupt the company before the wheels even hit the tarmac. Here is the story of how arrogance cost an airline $400 million. The tarmac at JFK was shimmering under the heat of a brutal July afternoon. Inside the cabin of Stratosphere Airlines Flight 299 bound for London Heathrow, the air conditioning was struggling to keep up, but in first class, the champagne was already flowing. Neera Cross adjusted the sleeves of her cream-coloured cashmere sweater and settled into Seat 1A. She didn't look like the typical clientele for Stratosphere's diamond class. She wasn't wearing a suit, she didn't have a loud watch, and she wasn't loudly barking into a Bluetooth headset. She wore minimal makeup, her hair was pulled back in a simple, protective bun, and she was reading a paperback novel with a cracked spine. To the untrained eye, Neera looked like someone who might have gotten a lucky upgrade. To those who knew the financial landscape of New York, Neera Cross was a shark in calm waters. She was the managing partner at Aurora Capital, a private equity firm that specialized in distressed assets. And Stratosphere Airlines, they were very distressed. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut through Neera's focus. Neera didn't jump, but she slowly lowered her book. Standing over her was a flight attendant with a name tag that read, Brianna. Brianna had the kind of forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was tight, strained, and predatory. Her uniform was impeccable, but her energy was chaotic. "Yes?" Neera asked, her voice low and smooth. "You need to stow that bag overhead," Brianna said, pointing a manicured finger at the sleek leather tote tucked under the ottoman in front of Neera. Neera glanced down. In first-class suites, the ottoman storage was specifically designed for bags during takeoff. It was one of the perks of paying $12,000 for a ticket. "Actually," Neera said, offering a polite, disarming smile, "the manual for this suite model allows for under-ottoman storage for takeoff and landing. It's secured." Brianna's eyes narrowed. She wasn't used to being corrected, especially not by someone like Neera. Brianna had been flying for 20 years. She had seen it all, and somewhere along the line, she had decided that her authority in the metal tube was absolute. She profiled passengers the moment they walked on. She liked the submissive ones. She liked the scared ones. She hated the calm ones. "I don't care what you think the manual says," Brianna snapped, her voice raising just enough to turn heads in rows 2 and 3. "I am the lead flight attendant. I am telling you it is a safety hazard. Put it up, now." Neera paused. She was tired. She had spent the last 72 hours in boardroom negotiations, finalizing the due diligence on a massive injection of capital that Stratosphere Airlines desperately needed to upgrade their aging fleet. In fact, the board of directors didn't even know she was the one coming to sign the papers in London. She was flying incognito to experience the product firsthand. And the product was failing. "Okay," Neera said softly. She didn't argue. She didn't pull the "do you know who I am" card. That was amateur hour. She simply unbuckled her belt, stood up, and lifted the bag. It was heavy, loaded with her laptop, 2 tablets, and the hard copy contracts for the merger. As she lifted it, her elbow brushed against the privacy divider. "Watch the leather," Brianna barked, stepping forward aggressively. "God, you people are careless." The cabin went silent. The phrase, "you people," hung in the chilled air like toxic smoke. Neera froze. She slowly placed the bag in the overhead bin and turned to face Brianna. Neera was 5'9", and when she stood with her full posture, she towered over the flight attendant. "Excuse me?" Neera asked, her expression unreadable. "What did you just say?" Brianna realized she might have slipped, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. Her face flushed red. "I said you people, tourists, upgraders. You don't know how to treat luxury property." Neera stared at her for a long, heavy second. Then she sat down and buckled her belt. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply reached for her phone. "Put the phone away," Brianna commanded, sensing she was losing control of the dynamic. "We are pushing back." "We are at the gate, Brianna," Neera said, looking at the screen. "And I am sending a text." "If you don't put that phone away, I will have you removed," Brianna threatened, leaning in close, invading Neera's personal space. Neera looked up, her eyes cold as ice. "Go ahead." The plane didn't push back. The pilot came over the intercom, announcing a slight delay due to load balancing. But everyone in the front cabin knew the truth. They were watching a power struggle unfold in 1A. Brianna stormed to the galley, grabbing the interphone. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She wasn't actually calling the pilot about safety. She was venting to her colleague, Sarah, who was working the business class section. "She's refusing to comply," Brianna hissed into the phone, glaring at the back of Neera's head. "She's aggressive. She's threatening me. I don't feel safe." Sarah, a younger attendant who had seen the whole thing, whispered back. "Brianna, she didn't do anything. She put the bag up. Just let it go. We're already late." "No," Brianna snapped. "She challenged me. You don't let them challenge you. That's how you lose the cabin. I'm writing her up. And if she says one more word, I'm calling the ground team." Back in seat 1A, Neera was calm, but her thumbs were flying across her phone screen. She wasn't texting a friend. She was messaging David Sterling, the CEO of Aurora Capital. "Neera, hold the wire transfer for the Stratosphere deal." "David." "What?" "Why?" "We're scheduled to sign in London tomorrow. The press release is drafted." "Neera. The product is defective. Personnel issues. Major liability. I'm on flight 299. I'm being harassed by the lead FA. If this is the company culture, the investment is a wash." "David, are you serious?" "Neera, that's a $400 million tranche." "Neera, hold it. Do not sign. I'll update you in the air." She locked her phone just as Brianna marched back down the aisle. Brianna had made a decision. She wasn't going to kick Neera off. That would take too long and require paperwork. She was going to make the next 7 hours a living hell. She wanted Neera to snap. If Neera snapped, Brianna could have the police waiting at Heathrow. It was a game Brianna had played before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cleared for departure," the pilot announced. As the plane taxied, Brianna did her safety check. She walked past Neera's seat, checking her seatbelt. She leaned in, her voice a poisonous whisper. "I've marked your seat. One wrong move, 1 foot out of line, and you're going to jail in London. I have zero tolerance for unruly passengers." Neera looked at Brianna, a faint, almost pitying smile playing on her lips. "I look forward to our arrival, Brianna." The flight took off. An hour in, the service began. In first class, this was meant to be a ballet of service. Hot towels, warm nuts, vintage wines. Brianna served seat 1F, a man named Mr. Henderson, a wealthy architect, with a beaming smile. "More scotch, Mr. Henderson?" "Of course. Let me get you a fresh glass." Then she turned to Neera in 1A. The smile vanished. She dropped the napkin on Neera's tray table without looking at her. "Meal choice?" Brianna asked, looking at the ceiling. "I pre-ordered the sea bass," Neera said politely. "We're out," Brianna lied instantly. She hadn't even checked the cart. "We only have the pasta." "That's fine," Neera said. "And I assume you want water," Brianna said, dismissing the wine list. "Actually, I'd like a glass of the Bollinger, please." "I think you've had enough," Brianna said. The The cabin went deadly silent again. Mr. Henderson in 1F lowered his newspaper. He had been watching. He hadn't seen Neera drink a drop of alcohol. She had boarded with a bottle of water. "Excuse me," Mr. Henderson spoke up. He was an older white man with silver hair and a deep, authoritative voice. "She hasn't had anything to drink. I've been sitting right here." Brianna whipped her head around, her smile faltering. "Sir, please don't interfere with crew duties. I am assessing passenger intoxication levels for safety." "She's reading a book," Henderson said, his brow furrowed. "You are being incredibly rude." "Sir," Brianna warned, her voice rising. "Do not make me report you for interfering with a flight crew. Sit down and drink your scotch." Henderson looked shocked. He looked at Neera, mouthing a silent, "I'm sorry." Neera gave him a subtle nod of appreciation. She didn't need him to fight for her, but it was good to have a witness. She looked at Brianna. "I will have water then." "Thank you." Brianna smirked, triumphant. She walked to the galley and returned with a plastic cup of tap water, not the bottled mineral water standard for first class. She slammed it down on Neera's linen tablecloth. The water sloshed over the rim, soaking the corner of Neera's paperback book. "Oops," Brianna said. Deadpan. Turbulence. The plane was perfectly smooth. Neera picked up a napkin and dabbed the water. She didn't complain. She didn't call for the purser. She simply unlocked her phone again and connected to the in-flight Wi-Fi. It cost $20. It was about to cost Stratosphere Airlines much, much more. She opened her secure email app. She composed a new email to the board of directors of Stratosphere Airlines. She had their private emails because she was supposed to be having dinner with them the following night. Subject: urgent. Regarding the Aurora Capital injection, immediate termination. Body: Dear gentlemen, I am currently seated in 1A on your flagship Flight 299 to London. I am writing this to inform you that Aurora Capital is formally withdrawing our offer of 400 metors in bridge financing, effective immediately. The reason is simple: operational incompetence and significant reputational risk. I am currently being harassed, threatened, and refused service by your lead flight attendant, Brianna Miller. If this is how your diamond staff treats a calm passenger, I cannot in good conscience trust your leadership with our capital. The culture is rot. I will be advising my partners to short the stock at market open. Regards, Neera Cross Managing Partner, Aurora Capital. She hit send. 10 minutes later, 30,000 feet somewhere over the Atlantic, the Wi-Fi on the plane seemed to be working perfectly. But in the corporate headquarters in London, phones were beginning to ring. Brianna, oblivious, was in the galley eating a chocolate mousse meant for a passenger, laughing with Sarah. "She's so quiet now," Brianna bragged. "I scared her. You have to show them who's boss early. She won't say a peep for the rest of the flight. And when we land, I'm calling the airport police. I'm going to say she threatened me verbally. It's her word against mine, and I have the uniform." Sarah looked uneasy. "Brianna, are you sure? She looks important." "Please," Brianna scoffed. "She's nobody. If she was important, she'd be making a scene. Real power makes noise." Brianna couldn't have been more wrong. Real power is silence, and the storm was gathering, not outside the plane, but on the ground in London. 3 hours passed. Neera slept peacefully, her noise-cancelling headphones blocking out the clatter of the galley. In London, it was 2:00 a.m., but the CEO of Stratosphere Airlines, Harrison Wells, was wide awake. His phone had alerted him to the email from Neera Cross. He read it once. He read it twice. The blood drained from his face. The deal with Aurora Capital was the only thing keeping the airline from declaring bankruptcy next quarter. They needed that cash flow, and Neera Cross, the Neera Cross, was on one of his planes being abused by a flight attendant. He immediately dialed the VP of Operations. "Get me the manifest for Flight 299. Now, who is the lead FA? Brianna Miller. I want her history. I want everything. And get the airport police at Heathrow on the line, not to arrest the passenger, to escort the crew. Back on the plane, the atmosphere had shifted. The pilots had received a message via ACARS, the digital data link system used for short messages between aircraft and ground stations. The captain, Captain Mike Reynolds, stared at the printout that had just spooled from the machine in the cockpit. MSG from HQ. Priority. 1. Do not engage passenger in 1A. Complaint filed by VIP investor. Ground ops manager. Meeting flight. Confirm status of F.A. Miller. Captain Reynolds frowned. He called the lead galley. Brianna, come to the cockpit, he said over the interphone. Brianna marched up, looking annoyed. She entered the cockpit. What is it, Mike? I'm in the middle of service. We got a message from London, Reynolds said, watching her carefully. Did something happen in first, with seat 1A? Brianna's heart skipped a beat, but she stuck to her script. Yes. She's been unruly since takeoff, refusing to stow bags, aggressive language. I cut her off from alcohol. I was going to ask you to call the police for arrival. Reynolds looked at the message again. It didn't match Brianna's story. HQ is saying she's a VIP. They are freaking out, Brianna. They want to know if you engaged her. She's a liar, Brianna said quickly, panic rising in her throat. She's probably tweeting complaints. Don't listen to her. I'm the lead here. I'm telling you, she's a threat to flight safety. Reynolds was a veteran pilot. He knew Brianna. He knew she could be difficult. But he had to back his crew. Okay, I'll relay that she is unruly. But London is already involved. Just keep away from her for the rest of the flight. Don't escalate. Brianna left the cockpit, fuming. A VIP? That woman? Impossible. She was wearing a sweater and reading a paperback. Brianna convinced herself that Neera was just some Karen with a Twitter following. She decided she needed to solidify her case. She walked back to the cabin. She needed witnesses. She approached Mr. Henderson in 1F. Sir, she whispered sweetly. I apologize for earlier. The passenger in 1A has been very difficult. When we land, the police might ask you if you saw her being aggressive. I'm sure you'd agree she was disruptive? Mr. Henderson looked at Brianna with pure disgust. You want me to lie to the police for you? I want you to tell the truth, Brianna hissed. The truth, Henderson said loudly, is that you are a bully, and I will be telling the police exactly that. Brianna recoiled. She had lost the cabin. She went back to the galley, her hands shaking. She was in too deep now. If she backed down, she'd look incompetent. If she pushed forward, she might win. She grabbed a Level 1 warning card, a red piece of paper airlines use to formally warn passengers of illegal behavior. She marched to 1A. Neera was awake, working on her laptop. Brianna slammed the red card on the table. This is a formal written warning, Brianna announced, her voice trembling with adrenaline. You have disrupted the duties of the flight crew. Upon landing, airport authorities will be boarding the aircraft to escort you off. Do not leave your seat when we gate. Neera looked at the card. She didn't touch it. She looked up at Brianna, her eyes filled with a terrifying calm. Brianna, Neera said softly, you have just made the biggest mistake of your career. Is that a threat? Brianna practically screamed. Did you hear that? She threatened me. Neera just turned back to her screen. She typed one more message to David. Neera, she just served me a red warning card. It's over. Kill the deal. The descent into London Heathrow is usually a bumpy affair, the aircraft weaving through thick cloud layers and holding patterns, but Flight 299 seemed to cut through the sky with an eerie smoothness. Inside the cabin, however, the turbulence was entirely psychological. Brianna Miller sat in her jump seat near the forward galley, facing rearward. She had a clear line of sight to seat 1A. She watched Neera cross with the eyes of a hawk, circling a field mouse. Brianna was running through her mental checklist of what she would say to the authorities. Passenger was belligerent, refused crew instructions, verbal threats, alcohol-induced aggression. She had rehearsed the lie so many times in the last 4 hours that it had become her truth. In Brianna's mind, she was the hero. She was protecting the sanctity of the first-class cabin from an outsider who didn't know her place. Neera, conversely, was putting her things away. She slid her laptop into her bag. She folded the blanket neatly, something most passengers in first class never bothered to do. She checked her phone one last time before losing the signal on final approach. A text from David. Board meeting emergency session called. Deal is officially dead. Press release scheduled for 9 a.m. NY time. You just cost them $500 million, Neera. I hope she was worth it. Neera didn't smile. She felt a heavy sadness. It wasn't about the money, it was about the waste. A company with thousands of employees, good mechanics, decent pilots. All of it jeopardized because the corporate culture allowed rot to fester at the customer-facing level. She wasn't destroying Stratosphere Airlines. She was merely stepping out of the way of a collapsing building. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. Captain Reynolds's voice boomed. The wheels touched down with a heavy thud, the reverse thrusters roaring like a dragon waking up. As the plane slowed and taxied off the runway, the chime sounded, releasing the crew from their jump seats. Brianna stood up immediately. She grabbed the interphone handset. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked her adrenaline. "Welcome to London Heathrow. For your safety, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We ask that all passengers remain in their seats, even after the seatbelt sign is turned off, as local authorities board the aircraft to deal with a security incident." A murmur rippled through the plane. In economy, people craned their necks. In business, they whispered. In first class, everyone looked at Neera. Neera looked out the window at the grey London sky. She saw the jet bridge extending toward the plane. Below, on the tarmac, she saw 3 police cars with flashing blue lights. But next to them was a black Range Rover with tinted windows, and a man in a high-visibility vest pacing nervously. The plane came to a halt at the gate. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Usually, this is the moment of chaos. The sound of overhead bins popping open, the rustle of coats. But today, nobody moved. The threat of police action kept everyone frozen. Brianna marched to the main cabin door, 1L. She waited for the knock. She adjusted her scarf. She prepared her face, the face of the victimized professional. Knock, knock. Brianna disarmed the door, rotated the heavy handle, and pushed it open. Cold English air rushed in. Standing on the jet bridge were 4 Metropolitan Police officers, 2 of them armed with submachine guns, standard for airport security responses. Behind them was a woman in a sharp navy suit holding a clipboard, and behind her, a man who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. It was Simon Granger, the station manager for Stratosphere Airlines at Heathrow. Brianna stepped forward, blocking the aisle. "Officers," she said, her voice trembling just the right amount. "Thank you for coming. The passenger is in 1A. She is extremely volatile." The lead officer, a tall sergeant named Patel, looked at Brianna. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He looked past her. "Move aside, please," Sergeant Patel said calmly. "She's right here," Brianna said, pointing a finger back at Neera. "I have her warning card. I want to press charges for interference with a flight crew. Move." "Aside," Patel repeated, his voice harder this time. Brianna blinked, confused, but she stepped back into the galley kitchen area. The police marched onto the plane. The entire first-class cabin held its breath. Brianna watched with a smirk, waiting for the handcuffs to come out. She waited for Neera to be dragged out of that leather seat. Sergeant Patel stopped at row 1. He looked at Neera, who was sitting with her hands folded in her lap. "Miss Cross?" the officer asked. "Yes, officer," Neera said softly. I'm Sergeant Patel. We received a priority call regarding this flight. He paused, and the cabin was silent enough to hear a pin drop. We are here to escort you off the aircraft safely, ma'am. Are you injured? Brianna's jaw dropped. Her mind couldn't process the words. Safely? Injured? I'm fine, Neera said, standing up gracefully. However, I have been threatened and harassed for the duration of this flight. I would like to file a formal statement. Of course, Patel said. We have a private room arranged in the terminal. Wait! Brianna shrieked. She couldn't help herself. She stepped out of the galley. What are you doing? She's the aggressor. I called you. She refused instructions. She threatened me. Simon Granger, the station manager, finally pushed his way through the police. His face was beet red, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked at Brianna with eyes full of pure, unadulterated panic. Brianna, shut up, Simon hissed. It wasn't a professional scold. It was the desperate plea of a man watching a train wreck. Simon? Brianna looked at her boss. She's lying. Ask the passengers. Yes, ask us, Mr. Henderson said from seat 1F. He stood up, towering over the divider. Officer, I am a witness. This flight attendant, Brianna, has been abusive, aggressive, and frankly unhinged for 7 hours. This lady in 1A hasn't done a single thing wrong except ask for water. I concur, said a woman in 2A. It was shocking behavior from the crew. She refused to serve her food, another passenger added. The witnesses were piling up. The dam had broken. Brianna looked around, her world spinning. You're all lying. You're ganging up on me. Sergeant Patel turned to Brianna. Madam, step away from the passenger. Now. Neera stepped into the aisle. She picked up her tote bag, the one that had started it all. She stopped in front of Brianna. Neera didn't gloat. She didn't yell. She looked at Brianna with a profound disappointment. I tried to tell you, Neera whispered. I tried to give you an out. You chose this. Get her off my plane, Brianna screamed, losing her composure entirely. Simon Granger grabbed Brianna's arm. Brianna, you are relieved of duty. Get your bag. You're coming with us too, but not to the VIP lounge. Neera walked off the plane, flanked by the police like a head of state. As she walked up the jet bridge, she saw the text notification on her phone. Breaking news. Stratosphere Airlines, Strat. Stock plummets 15% in pre-market trading following rumors of failed capital injection. The karma wasn't coming later. It was already here. The private room Sergeant Patel had mentioned was actually the Windsor suite at Heathrow, usually reserved for royals and heads of state. Stratosphere Airlines was pulling out every stop to try and contain the nuclear explosion Neera had detonated. Neera sat on a plush velvet sofa, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. Across from her sat Simon Granger, station manager, and a woman who had just arrived, breathless. Victoria Vance, the VP of Customer Experience for Stratosphere, who happened to be in London for the impending board meeting. Victoria looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. She had the manifest in her hand and an iPad showing the stock ticker. Ms. Cross, Victoria began, her voice shaking slightly. On behalf of the CEO, Harrison Wells, and the entire board, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are. This is an aberration. Brianna Miller is a senior attendant, but her behavior as described is inexcusable. Neera set her teacup down. Clink. It's not an aberration, Victoria, Neera said. It's a symptom. I've been looking at your financials for months. I saw the high turnover in your service staff. I saw the cuts to your training budget. I saw the lack of oversight. I thought it was just numbers on a spreadsheet. Neera leaned forward. Today, I saw what those cuts look like in human form. You empowered a bully because you were too cheap to train a leader. And when that bully targeted a customer, the system didn't stop her. The pilot didn't stop her. The other flight attendants didn't stop her. That is a systemic failure. Victoria swallowed hard. We can fix this. We can fire her immediately. We can offer you— I don't want your vouchers, Victoria, Neera cut her off. And I don't want your apologies. The deal is dead. Aurora Capital does not invest in liabilities, and right now, your brand is toxic. Meanwhile, 3 rooms away, in a stark, fluorescent-lit airport security office, the scene was very different. Brianna was sitting on a hard plastic chair. She was still in her uniform, but her scarf was undone. She was furious. She was texting her union representative, a man named Gary. Brianna, they are holding me. They let the passenger go. This is insane. I followed protocol. I want a lawyer. Gary, Brianna, stop texting. I'm on the phone with HQ. It's bad. Brianna, it's bad for them. I have a hostile work environment claim. Gary, Brianna, listen to me. The passenger is Neera Cross. Brianna stared at the phone. The name meant nothing to her. She typed back. Brianna, who cares? Is she a celebrity? She looks like a librarian. Gary, she's the managing partner of Aurora Capital, the company that was supposed to save the airline tomorrow. They just pulled the funding. The news is saying the airline might go into administration by next week. Brianna felt a cold drop of sweat slide down her spine. Administration meant bankruptcy. It meant layoffs. It meant pensions disappearing. No, Brianna whispered to the empty room. That's not— she can't do that. She's just one person. The door opened. It wasn't the police. It was the police liaison and a human resources director from the airline who had been driven over from the corporate office. Brianna Miller, the HR director, a stern man named Mr. Clark, asked. Yes, I want to file a grievance, Brianna said, trying to summon her old fire. We are placing you on immediate unpaid suspension pending an investigation, Mr. Clark said, handing her a letter. We need your badge and your airport ID. You can't do that. The union has already seen the statements from the passengers, Mr. Clark said coldly. Mr. Henderson in 1F recorded a video of you slamming the water down, and Mrs. Gable in 2A recorded you screaming, "Get her off my plane." It's all over TikTok, Brianna. It has 2 million views in an hour. Brianna's blood ran cold. Recorded? Let me see, she whispered. Mr. Clark turned his phone around. There it was, a shaky video, filmed through the gap in the seats. It showed Brianna's face, twisted in rage, screaming at Neera, who sat perfectly still. The caption on the video read, "Traska Stratosphere Nightmare. Psycho flight attendant attacks chill passenger." The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Fire her. I'm never flying this airline again. Look at how calm the lady is. That FA is unhinged. Stock price is tanking. Brianna looked up at Mr. Clark. For the first time, the arrogance evaporated. She wasn't the lead flight attendant anymore. She was a viral villain. I was stressed, Brianna stammered. We were short-staffed. The catering was wrong. You just cost this airline $400 million, Mr. Clark said, his voice void of sympathy. Give me the badge. Brianna reached up with trembling hands and unpinned the silver wings from her lapel, the wings she had worn for 20 years. She handed them over. She felt naked. The next morning, the Stratosphere Airlines headquarters in London was a war zone. The boardroom, usually a place of quiet power and expensive coffee, smelled of fear and stale sweat. Harrison Wells, the CEO, was pacing at the head of the table. He was a man who usually commanded the room, but today he looked like a captain whose ship had already hit the iceberg. The screen on the wall showed CNBC. The chyron read, "Aurora Capital pulls out. Stratosphere Airlines, stock down 38%. Get her on the phone. Harrison barked at his assistant. Get Neera Cross on the phone right now. Sir, Her assistant says she's unavailable. She's flying back to New York tonight, the assistant squeaked. On who? Harrison asked. British Airways, sir. Harrison slammed his fist on the table. We need damage control. Where is Brianna Miller? Fired, sir. Terminated for cause this morning, the HR director replied. We issued a statement condemning her behavior. It's not enough, Harrison yelled. The narrative isn't about one bad apple anymore. It's about us. The market thinks we're a chaotic mess. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. The room went silent. Neera Cross walked in. She wasn't supposed to be there. She was supposed to be avoiding them. But Neera was a shark, and sharks don't swim away from blood. They investigate the source. She was wearing a different outfit today, a sharp, charcoal power suit. She walked in not as a passenger, but as an executioner. Ms. Cross, Harrison stammered, smoothing his tie. We were told you were unavailable. I'm flying out in 3 hours, Neera said, her voice echoing in the silent room. But I thought I owed you the courtesy of telling you to your face why your company is dying. She walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table and didn't sit. She stood, leaning her hands on the polished wood. Harrison, Neera said, yesterday your employee treated me like a criminal because of her own insecurities. But the problem isn't Brianna. The problem is that your system protected her for 20 years. I looked at her file last night. Harrison paled. You have her file? My team is very thorough, Neera said. Brianna Miller had 42 complaints in 10 years. 40. 2. Rude behavior, racial profiling, aggression. And do you know what you did? Neera pulled a piece of paper from her folder and slid it down the table. You promoted her. You made her a lead. You gave her a Customer Service Excellence Award in 2019 because she had perfect attendance. Neera looked around the room, making eye contact with every board member. You rewarded toxicity because it was cheap. You ignored the complaints because they came from economy passengers you didn't care about. But yesterday, the toxicity leaked into first class, and now you're shocked that it's costing you money. Neera, please, Harrison begged. We can change. We can overhaul the training. With your capital— No, Neera said firmly. You don't get the capital. The capital is for builders, not for cleaners. I'm not here to clean up your mess. She straightened up. I'm here to make an offer for the scraps. The room gasped. The scraps? A board member asked. The stock is at 4 pesos a share right now, Neera said, checking her watch. It was 12 pesos yesterday. By noon, when the debt covenants trigger, it will be 2 pesos. I am offering to buy the airline's assets, the planes, the slots at Heathrow, and the maintenance hangars, for pennies on the dollar. But not the brand. The brand Stratosphere dies today. I'm shutting it down and rebranding. You can't do that, Harrison shouted. This is my company. Not anymore, Neera said calmly. The shareholders are panic selling. My analysts are buying up the debt as we speak. By tomorrow morning, Aurora Capital will own the majority of your debt, which means we own you. Harrison collapsed into his chair. He realized the trap hadn't been set on the plane. The plane was just the trigger. The trap was the financial leverage Neera held. You have 2 choices, Neera said, picking up her bag, the same bag Brianna had tried to move. You can declare bankruptcy, get liquidated, and walk away with nothing. Or you can accept my buyout, step down, and let me build an airline that actually treats people with dignity. She turned to leave. Oh, she paused at the door. And one condition. What? Harrison whispered, defeated. I want Brianna Miller to be blacklisted from the industry, not just fired. I want it on her permanent record that she compromised flight safety. She never works in the sky again. Harrison nodded slowly. Done. Neera walked out. The boardroom remained silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock and the plummeting red line on the stock ticker. Brianna Miller didn't go to jail that day, but she went somewhere worse. She went home to the internet. By the time she unlocked the door to her flat in Hounslow, the hashtag #FirstClassBully was trending #1 globally on Twitter, X. The video Mr. Henderson had filmed was damning. It didn't just show Brianna being rude, it showed the contrast. It showed Neera Cross, poised and elegant, sitting in silence, while Brianna, hair slightly out of place, face contorted, screamed like a banshee. Brianna sat on her couch, still in her tights and undershirt, and made the fatal mistake of opening the comments. I flew with her last year to Dubai. She yelled at my son for crying. She's a monster. This is Brianna Miller. She lives in London. She's been a tyrant at Stratosphere for years. Does she know who she yelled at? That's Neera Cross. She literally owns the money. Then her phone rang. It wasn't the airline. It was a tabloid reporter. Ms. Miller, we're running a story on page 3 tomorrow titled, "The $400 Million Mistake." Do you have a comment on how it feels to single-handedly bankrupt an airline? Brianna hung up and threw her phone across the room. She felt a surge of indignation. They don't know the whole story, she told herself. I was protecting the cabin. In a moment of desperation, she opened her laptop and logged into Facebook. She wrote a long, rambling public post defending herself. She blamed entitled passengers. She blamed stress, and she hinted that Neera had provoked her off camera. It was the final nail in her coffin. Within 10 minutes, Stratosphere Airlines' official account replied to her post, a move unheard of in corporate PR history. Stratosphere Airlines official, Ms. Miller, your employment was terminated for cause due to gross misconduct and violation of safety protocols. Your attempt to defame a passenger continues to violate our privacy policies. Cease and desist immediately, or further legal action will be taken. The internet exploded again. Brianna deleted the post, but screenshots live forever. 2 days later, the hard karma hit from a direction she didn't expect. Her colleagues. Brianna went to the local crew bar near Heathrow, a place she had held court for years, expecting sympathy. She walked in, and the room went silent. These were people she had flown with, drank with, and gossiped with. She walked up to the bar. "Pint of lager, please, Tom." Tom, the bartender, didn't move. A senior captain, Captain Reynolds, the pilot from Flight 299, was sitting in a booth. He stood up. "You shouldn't be here, Brianna," he said, his voice low and tired. "Why?" Brianna demanded. "I'm a victim here. She baited me." "You're not a victim," Reynolds said, stepping closer. "Because of you, the financing deal collapsed. The stock is worthless. I just got an email that our pension fund is frozen. The young flight attendants, the ones with mortgages and kids, they're all getting laid off next week because we have to restructure." Reynolds pointed at the door. "You didn't just hurt a passenger. You destroyed our livelihoods. Nobody here wants to drink with you. Get out." Brianna looked around the room. She saw tears in the eyes of a young stewardess. She saw anger in the eyes of the baggage handlers. She turned and walked out into the rain. She was alone. The collapse of Stratosphere Airlines didn't happen quietly. It was a slow, agonizing death rattle that played out on the global stage. In the 30 days following the incident on Flight 299, the company attempted to limp forward, but the damage was systemic. The viral video of Brianna Miller screaming at Neera Cross had become more than just an internet meme. It had become a case study in business schools overnight. It was the visual representation of a brand that had lost its soul. Passengers boycotted in droves, corporate contracts were cancelled, and when the credit markets saw Neera Cross, the oracle of distress, walk away, they closed their wallets. When Stratosphere finally filed for administration, It wasn't just a news ticker item. It was a tragedy for thousands. Brianna watched it all from the small, rented television in her living room, a room that felt smaller every day. She saw the weeping flight attendants turning in their uniforms. She saw the pilots, men and women she had known for decades, carrying boxes out of the headquarters. She saw the angry interviews with union leaders who didn't blame the economy. They blamed the toxic culture that allowed incidents to rot the company from the inside. Brianna turned off the TV. She couldn't bear to watch. She told herself, it wasn't just me. It couldn't be just me. But deep down, in the silence of her empty flat, she knew. She was the match that had been dropped into a room full of gasoline. The hard karma that the internet had promised didn't come as a lightning bolt. It came as a slow, suffocating frost. Brianna needed work. She had a mortgage to pay, a car lease, and a lifestyle built on a senior flight attendant's salary. She applied to British Airways. She applied to Virgin. She applied to the budget carriers, EasyJet, Ryanair. The rejection emails came instantly, automated, cold. Finally, she secured an interview with a small charter airline that flew oil rig workers to the North Sea. It wasn't glamorous. There was no champagne, no first class. It was rough, dangerous flying, but Brianna was desperate. She walked into the interview room in Luton, wearing her best suit, trying to project the image of the experienced professional she once was. The interviewer, a man named Mr. Davids, looked at her CV, then looked at his computer screen. He frowned. He typed something. He clicked. Then he turned the screen toward her. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice flat. "Do you know what the P24 database is?" Brianna shook her head, her throat tight. "It's an industry-shared risk assessment file," Davids explained. "Your name is flagged. Red level. Safety risk due to inability to de-escalate. Gross misconduct involving VIP clientele." Brianna felt the blood drain from her face. That was one time. It was a misunderstanding. "In aviation, Ms. Miller, we don't get one time when it comes to safety," David said, closing the folder. "You are uninsurable. I can't hire you. No one can. You will never work inside an aircraft again." Brianna walked out of that office into the grey drizzle of the parking lot. She sat in her car and screamed until her throat was raw. It was over. The sky, the only home she had known for 20 years, was closed to her forever. 1 year later, while Brianna's world was shrinking, near across was expanding hers. The hangar at JFK was bathed in soft, ambient light, designed to look like the break of dawn. Hundreds of journalists, investors, and aviation enthusiasts gathered for the unveiling. The air smelled of expensive coffee and optimism. Neera Cross took the stage. She looked different than she had on that fateful flight. She wasn't the quiet passenger reading a paperback anymore. She was a titan of industry. But she still wore that same calm, confident expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," Neera began, her voice amplified across the hangar. "A year ago, I witnessed the death of an airline. It died because it forgot a simple truth. You cannot move people if you do not value them." The curtain behind her dropped. The crowd gasped. Behind her stood the flagship aircraft of the new carrier, Horizon Airways. It was beautiful. The fuselage was a deep, midnight blue that faded into a pearlescent white near the nose, symbolizing the transition from night to day. The tail featured a stylized golden sun rising over the curvature of the earth. "Horizon Airways is not just a rebrand," Neera continued. "It is a rebirth. We purchased the assets of Stratosphere, but we burned the rule book." She gestured to the group of flight attendants standing by the landing gear. They weren't just models, they were real crew members, many of whom had been rehired from the old airline. They wore uniforms that looked comfortable, stylish, and dignified. At Horizon, our crew are not servants. They are safety and service professionals. They have the authority to pause service if they are tired. They have the training to de-escalate with empathy, not threats. And most importantly, Neera paused, looking directly into the camera lens. We know that every passenger, whether they are in seat 1A or 34E, deserves to be treated with humanity. The stock ticker for the new IPO flashed on the screen behind her. It was already up 15%. Neera had done the impossible. She had turned a $400 million disaster into $1 billion revolution. 3,000 miles away, the celebration was just a news clip on a smartphone screen. Brianna sat on a plastic stool in a drafty booth at a bus terminal in Slough, an industrial town on the outskirts of London. The rain was hammering against the plexiglass. She was wearing a high-visibility vest over a fleece jacket that was 2 sizes too big. She wasn't a flight attendant anymore. She was a luggage logistics coordinator for a budget intercity bus line. It was a fancy title for loading bags. She watched the clip of Neera cross on her phone during her break. She saw the beautiful plane. She saw the smiling faces of her old colleagues, the ones she used to boss around, now looking happy and proud in their new uniforms. A tear rolled down Brianna's cheek. She quickly wiped it away as a bus pulled into the bay. The air brakes hissed, a sound that used to annoy her, but was now the soundtrack of her life. The doors opened, and a harried young mother struggled to get a stroller and 2 screaming toddlers off the bus. The woman looked exhausted, on the verge of tears. Old Brianna would have stayed in the booth. Old Brianna would have tapped the sign that said, "Staff, do not assist with personal items." Old Brianna would have rolled her eyes at the noise. But Brianna Miller was not who she used to be. The humiliation of the last year had scrubbed the arrogance off her soul like steel wool. She stood up. Her knees ached. The damp cold got into her joints these days. She walked out into the rain. "Here, love," Brianna said, her voice raspy but gentle. "Let me take the stroller." The young mother looked up, startled by the kindness. "Oh God, thank you. I'm so sorry, It's been a long trip." "I know," Brianna said. She skillfully collapsed the stroller with one hand, muscle memory from years of handling equipment, and set it down gently under the shelter. She then reached out and took one of the heavy bags from the mother's shoulder. "Take a breath," Brianna said, looking the woman in the eye. "You're doing a good job. They're safe. You're on the ground." The mother smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. "Thank you. You're an angel." Brianna froze. The rain plastered her hair to her forehead. An angel. She looked up at the grey sky. High above the cloud layer, she heard the faint roar of a jet engine. It might have been a Horizon Airways flight, climbing toward the sun, filled with champagne and laughter. Brianna watched it for a second, then looked back at the bus station. This was her altitude now. Sea level. But as she helped the mother guide her children toward the waiting room, Brianna felt a strange, quiet warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in the first-class cabin for years. She had lost her wings, but for the first time in her life, she had found her feet. She realized that Neera Cross hadn't just destroyed her career. She had, in a painful, brutal way, saved her from the monster she had become. Brianna zipped up her high-vis vest, turned back to the queue of tired travelers, and got back to work. And that is the story of how one moment of arrogance brought down an empire. Stratosphere Airlines is gone, a relic of the past, all because one person thought a badge gave them the right to belittle another human being. It's a brutal lesson, isn't it? We often hear the phrase, "the customer is always right," and we know that's not always true. But in this case, the customer wasn't just right. She was the lifeline. Brianna Miller didn't know she was talking to the woman signing her paycheck, but that's the point. You shouldn't need to know someone is a millionaire to treat them with basic human decency. Near a Cross showed us that true power isn't about screaming or asserting authority. True power is composure. It's the ability to sit quietly while someone else digs their own grave, and then, with a single email, change the world. Brianna's karma wasn't magic. It was the direct result of her actions. In the real world, bad behavior leaves a paper trail, and in the age of smartphones, that trail is digital and permanent. So the next time you feel like snapping at a stranger, or the next time you see someone abusing their tiny bit of power, remember Flight 299. Remember that you never truly know who you're talking to. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice, please destroy that like button. Don't be a Brianna to the YouTube algorithm. And if you want more stories about karma, revenge, and the crazy things that happen in the real world, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification. I've got a story coming up next week about a HOA president who tried to tow a FBI agent's car. You do not want to miss that one. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.